The autumn wind carries the last whispers of October through Riverside Park, scattering golden leaves across weathered pathways like scattered memories. Clint Eastwood walks slowly along the main trail, his worn leather boots crunching softly against the carpet of fallen maple and oak leaves that have begun their annual surrender to winter. In the distance, beneath the ancient elm tree that has stood sentinel over this corner of the park for nearly a century, a figure moves with deliberate purpose. The man appears to be in his 60s, dressed in faded work clothes and a knitted cap pulled low over his eyes. His movements are careful, methodical, as he kneels among the fallen leaves with the patience of someone who has learned that the most important work is often done in silence. Clint pauses on the path, watching as the man picks up individual leaves, examines them closely, then places them in careful arrangements on the ground. The scene strikes him as oddly purposeful, too deliberate to be simple maintenance work. As he draws closer, he can see that the leaves have been arranged in patterns, lines and curves that suggest something more than random placement. The man works without speaking, his concentration absolute. When a group of joggers passes by, one of them calls out with casual cruelty, "Hey, crazy leaf man, still playing with your garbage?" The others laugh, their voices carrying the casual dismissiveness that people use when they encounter something they don't understand. The man doesn't look up, doesn't acknowledge the comment. He simply continues his work, selecting another leaf with the care of an artist choosing the perfect brushstroke. But Clint notices the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his hands pause for just a moment before resuming their careful placement. As the joggers disappear around the bend, Clint approaches the man slowly, his curiosity overcoming his usual preference for solitude. The arrangements of leaves become clearer as he draws near. They form letters, words spelled out in the natural script of autumn's offerings. The man finally looks up, and Clint sees kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. A face weathered by years of outdoor work and marked by a quiet dignity that speaks of inner strength. The man's mouth opens as if to speak, then closes. He points to his throat and shakes his head, a gentle gesture that explains his silence. Clint kneels down beside the leaf arrangements, studying the words that have been spelled out with such care. Memory, hope, forgiveness, love. Each word is crafted from leaves of different colors and shapes, creating a natural mosaic of human emotion written in the language of the season. "You're writing," Clint says quietly, understanding beginning to dawn. "These aren't just decorations, you're telling stories." The man nods, his eyes brightening with the recognition that someone finally sees his work for what it truly is. He points to himself, then to the leaves, then spreads his hands in a gesture that encompasses the entire park. This is his canvas, his voice, his way of speaking to a world that has learned to ignore him. The misunderstood artist. Clint settles onto a nearby bench, his curiosity transforming into something deeper, a recognition of artistry and purpose that demands respect. The man continues his work, and Clint watches as new words take shape. Vietnam, brothers, silence, pain. "You served," Clint observes, the words forming a statement rather than a question. The man looks up sharply, surprise flickering across his features. He nods slowly, then points to his throat again. With careful movements, he mimes an explosion, touches his neck, and spreads his hands helplessly. The story unfolds without words, a battlefield injury that stole his voice but not his need to communicate. "My name's Clint. I'd like to know yours." The man considers for a moment, then begins arranging leaves with renewed purpose. Soon the letters spell out Thomas, followed by Tom. He points to himself and nods, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Tom, it's good to meet you, Tom. How long have you been doing this, writing with leaves?" Tom holds up 5 fingers, then points to the ground where he's been working. 5 years of daily visits to this spot, 5 years of crafting messages that most people dismiss as the eccentric behavior of a man they've labeled as the crazy leaf guy. As if summoned by their conversation, a park maintenance worker approaches with obvious annoyance. "Mr. Eastwood? Sorry to bother you, but you should probably move along. This guy here's been making messes all over the park. We keep having to clean up after him." Clint's jaw tightens slightly, but his voice remains calm. "What kind of messes?" "Oh, you know, arranging leaves in patterns, making what he thinks are words. It's not natural. Leaves should just fall where they fall, not get organized into some kind of art project." "Have you ever looked closely at what he's making?" The maintenance worker shrugs dismissively. "Doesn't matter what it is. It's not his job to rearrange nature. That's what we're here for." Tom has been watching this exchange with growing discomfort, his hands still among the leaves, but his movements hesitant now. The joy that had animated his work begins to fade, replaced by the resigned acceptance of someone who has grown accustomed to being misunderstood. "Actually, it matters a great deal," Clint says, his voice carrying quiet authority. "Tom here is a veteran who lost his voice serving his country. This is how he communicates, how he shares his thoughts and memories. You're not looking at a mess, you're looking at literature." The maintenance worker's expression shifts from annoyance to uncertainty. I didn't know he was a veteran. But still, the park has rules about... Rules about what? About expression? About art? About a man finding a way to speak when words have been taken from him? Tom looks between the two men, then slowly begins gathering his leaves. He's preparing to leave, to avoid the confrontation that his presence seems to have caused. But Clint places a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Don't go, Tom. Your words belong here just as much as anyone else's." The stories in the leaves. Over the following weeks, Clint finds himself returning to the park regularly, drawn by curiosity about Tom's daily messages. Each visit reveals new combinations of words, new stories told in the temporary medium of fallen leaves. Some days the messages are simple, grateful, peaceful, remembering. Other days they form more complex narratives that speak of loss, hope, and the struggle to find meaning in silence. On a particularly cold morning in November, Clint arrives to find Tom arranging leaves that spell out, "Johnny, age 19, died for friends." The words are surrounded by leaves arranged in the rough shape of a cross, and Tom's movements are slower, more reverent than usual. "Johnny was important to you," Clint observes, settling onto his usual bench. Tom nods, then begins a new arrangement. "My son," followed by "helicopter crash," then Iraq 2003. The story emerges piece by piece, each leaf placed with the careful attention of a man crafting a memorial from the materials the earth has provided. "I'm sorry for your loss, Tom. No parent should have to bury their child." Tom looks up, and Clint sees tears in the older man's eyes. The silence between them is not empty but full, filled with shared understanding of loss, of the weight that some men carry long after the battles have ended. "Is this why you write? For Johnny?" Tom considers the question, then creates a new word. "Everyone." He points to the previous messages, then to the park around them, then to himself. His writing isn't just for his son, but for all the voices that have been silenced, all the stories that need telling. As they sit together in comfortable silence, a young mother approaches with her 5-year-old daughter. The child breaks away from her mother's hand and runs toward Tom's leaf arrangements, her eyes wide with wonder. "Mommy, look! The leaves are making words! How do leaves know how to spell?" The mother hurries forward, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Sophie, don't bother the man. Come away from there right now." But Sophie ignores her mother's urgency, kneeling down beside Tom's work with the fearless curiosity that only children possess. "Did you teach the leaves to write? That's so cool." Tom's face lights up at the child's enthusiasm. He nods and points to the word love, then to Sophie, then to her mother. The message is clear. This is what matters. this connection between generations, this wonder that sees art where others see only debris. "He's not bothering anyone," Clint says to the mother. "Tom here is a storyteller. He's showing your daughter that words can come from anywhere, even from the things that fall from trees." The mother relaxes slightly, watching as Tom carefully selects a perfect red maple leaf and hands it to Sophie. The child accepts it with the reverence usually reserved for precious gifts. "What does this one say?" Sophie asks. Tom points to the leaf, then to Sophie's heart, then spreads his hands in a gesture that encompasses everything around them. The leaf doesn't say anything by itself, but it's part of a larger story, part of the ongoing conversation between earth and sky, between seasons and souls. "I think he's saying that every leaf has a story," Clint interprets, "just like every person has a story worth telling." The growing recognition word of Tom's leaf poetry begins to spread through the community, carried by children like Sophie who see magic where adults see only maintenance issues. A local teacher brings her third-grade class to observe Tom's work as part of a lesson on alternative forms of communication. The children sit in a circle around his daily arrangements, asking questions through interpreters and marveling at the idea that someone could make art from fallen leaves. Mrs. Patterson, the teacher, approaches Clint after one of these informal sessions. "I've never seen anything like this." The children are fascinated by the idea that communication doesn't always require speaking. It's opened up discussions about inclusion, about different abilities, about finding your voice even when you can't use your voice. "Tom has a gift for teaching without trying to teach," Clint observes. "He just shows up every day and does his work. The lessons come naturally." "Would you mind if I brought this to the attention of the school district? We've been looking for ways to incorporate more diverse perspectives into our curriculum, and this seems like a natural fit." Clint considers the question, watching as Tom carefully arranges leaves that spell out children, joy, future. "That's not my decision to make. You'd have to ask Tom." When Mrs. Patterson approaches Tom with her request, using simple gestures and written notes to communicate, his response is immediate and enthusiastic. He nods vigorously, then begins creating a new message. Honored, grateful, yes. The partnership that develops between Tom and the school creates ripple effects throughout the community. Parents who had previously hurried their children past the crazy leaf man now stop to observe his work. Local artists begin visiting the park, intrigued by the concept of ephemeral art created from natural materials. A reporter from the local newspaper arrives one morning, drawn by the story of the veteran who creates poetry from fallen leaves. But when she attempts to interview Tom, she quickly realizes that the usual format of questions and answers won't work. Instead, she sits quietly and observes, watching as Tom's daily message takes shape. Stories, everywhere. Listen. The resulting article, titled "The Silent Poet of Riverside Park," transforms Tom's local recognition into something much larger. Letters begin arriving at the park office, addressed simply to Tom, the leaf writer. Veterans from around the country share their own stories of finding alternative ways to communicate trauma and healing. Art therapists reach out, interested in Tom's methods. Children send drawings inspired by his leaf arrangements. But with recognition comes unwanted attention. Park administrators receive complaints from visitors who feel that Tom's activities don't belong in a public space. A city council member suggests that designated areas should be established for artistic expression to prevent conflicts with traditional park uses. They want to put him in a cage, Clint tells his friend Eddie during one of their weekly coffee meetings. Give him a little corner where he can do his art without bothering anyone. Maybe that wouldn't be so bad, Eddie suggests. At least he'd have official permission to continue his work. You're missing the point. Tom doesn't write in a vacuum. He writes in relationship to the place, to the people who pass by, to the seasons as they change. Put him in a designated area, and you kill the very thing that makes his work meaningful. The deeper story. As winter approaches and the supply of fresh leaves diminishes, Tom's messages become more sparse, but somehow more poignant. He begins incorporating other natural elements, twigs, stones, seed pods, into his compositions. The words adaptation, persistence, survival appear spelled out in materials that speak of nature's resilience. During one of their regular encounters, Clint notices that Tom has arranged materials to spell out family, wife, gone. The message is accompanied by a small arrangement that resembles a wedding ring, crafted from bent twigs and small stones. "You lost your wife too," Clint observes gently. Tom nods, then creates a new message. Cancer, 2 years, alone. The story of his loss unfolds gradually, each element placed with the care of someone handling sacred memories. "Is that why you started writing? After she died?" Tom considers the question, then begins a more complex arrangement. The words, Helen, understood, silence, take shape, followed by after, needed, voice. The narrative becomes clear. His wife had been his translator, his bridge to the speaking world. After her death, he had to find new ways to communicate, new methods of connection. "She would be proud of what you've accomplished here," Clint says. Tom's eyes fill with tears, but his smile is genuine. He points to the sky, then to his heart, then to the words he's created. Helen is still part of his conversation with the world, still present in every message he crafts. As they sit together watching the afternoon light fade across the park, Tom begins working on his most ambitious project yet. Using every available material, he creates a sprawling narrative that covers nearly 10 square feet of ground. The words tell a story of war and loss, of silence and discovery, of community and connection. At the center of it all, surrounded by carefully placed leaves in the shape of a heart, are the words, "Still here, still speaking, still hoping." "This is beautiful, Tom, but it's too big for just the two of us to see. You should share this with more people." Tom looks uncertain, his usual confidence wavering. He's grown comfortable with his small daily audiences, children, dog walkers, the occasional curious passerby. The idea of deliberately seeking a larger audience seems to overwhelm him. What if we invited people to come see it? Not a big crowd, just a few folks who would appreciate what you've created. Tom considers this, then slowly nods. He adds new words to his composition. Ready, nervous, honored. The revelation. The small gathering that assembles the following Saturday represents a cross-section of the community that has grown around Tom's work. Mrs. Patterson brings several of her students and their parents. The local librarian arrives with a group of seniors from the reading club. A few veterans from the VFW post attend, drawn by word-of-mouth stories about one of their own, finding a unique voice. Tom stands nervously beside his creation, overwhelmed by the attention, but visibly moved by the presence of so many people who have come specifically to see his work. The afternoon sun filters through the bare branches above, casting intricate shadows across his leaf poetry. Mrs. Patterson addresses the small crowd. What we're looking at here isn't just art. It's communication in its purest form. One human being reaching out to others, sharing experiences and emotions in a language that transcends spoken words. A veteran in his 70s approaches Tom and extends his hand. "I was in Vietnam too, son. Different time, different place, but I understand the silence. What you're doing here, it gives voice to all of us who came back different." Tom shakes the man's hand, and something passes between them. The recognition that only exists between those who have shared certain experiences. The older veteran looks down at the leaf arrangement and nods slowly. "You're telling our story. All of our stories." A young art student from the local college asks permission to photograph the work, explaining that she's writing her thesis on outsider art and alternative forms of expression. Tom hesitates, then looks to Clint for guidance. "It's your choice, Tom. But remember, photographs last longer than leaves. Your words could reach people you'll never meet." Tom considers this, then nods his consent. As the student carefully documents his work, he begins creating a new message alongside the original. Share, remember, continue, member. The gathering continues for nearly 2 hours, with visitors asking questions through written notes and gestures, sharing their own stories of communication challenges, and expressing amazement at the complexity and beauty of Tom's temporary art. As the crowd begins to disperse, a middle-aged woman approaches Tom with tears in her eyes. She writes a quick note and hands it to him. "My son has autism and doesn't speak. Seeing your work gives me hope that he'll find his own way to share his thoughts with the world." Tom reads the note, then immediately begins creating a response in leaves. Every voice matters. Find way. He hands the woman a perfect yellow leaf as she leaves, and she clutches it to her chest like a talisman. The challenge. The success of the gathering draws unwanted attention from city officials who view Tom's growing popularity as a potential problem. A Parks Department supervisor arrives the following Monday with a formal notice requiring Tom to obtain permits for any future organized events in the park. "I'm sorry, Mr. What did you say your name was?" the supervisor asks, looking uncomfortable as he realizes Tom cannot answer. "His name is Tom," Clint intervenes, having arrived for his usual morning visit. "And he wasn't organizing an event. People came to see his work because they wanted to. Regardless, we can't have unauthorized gatherings in the park. If this gentleman wants to continue his activities, he needs to go through proper channels. His activities consist of arranging leaves that have already fallen. Last I checked, that wasn't illegal. It's not about legality, Mr. Eastwood. It's about park management and public safety. What happens when larger crowds start showing up? What about liability issues? Insurance concerns?" Tom watches this exchange with growing distress. He begins gathering his materials, preparing to leave rather than cause more trouble. But Clint places a firm hand on his shoulder. "Tom, you have as much right to be here as anyone else. Don't let bureaucracy chase you away from the place where you found your voice." The supervisor's expression softens slightly. "Look, I'm not trying to be the bad guy here, but I have a job to do, and part of that job is making sure the park operates smoothly for everyone. Maybe we can find a compromise." "What kind of compromise?" "There's a community garden area that doesn't get much use this time of year. Mr. Tom could set up there, maybe even get some official recognition as a park artist in residence. It would give him legitimacy and protect the department from liability issues." Tom looks between the two men, uncertainty written across his features. He begins spelling out words in leaves. Afraid, change, here, home. "This is his home," Clint explains. "This tree, this spot. It's where he found his voice after losing it. Moving him somewhere else would be like asking a poet to write in a language he doesn't speak." The supervisor looks genuinely conflicted. "I understand the emotional attachment, but I have to think about practical concerns. What if I could arrange for this area to be designated as an artistic space? Official recognition, but in the same location." Tom considers this proposal, then slowly begins creating a new message. Compromise. Trust. Try. The transformation. The official designation of Tom's corner of the park as the Veterans Expression Garden comes with both benefits and challenges. A small plaque acknowledges the space as dedicated to alternative forms of communication and artistic expression, and Tom receives official permission to continue his work without interference. But the formalization of his activities also changes their nature. What had been spontaneous and intimate becomes somewhat institutionalized. Tour groups begin including Tom's garden in their routes through the park. Photography enthusiasts arrive with professional equipment, treating his daily creations as performance art rather than personal expression. Tom struggles with the increased attention, his movements becoming self-conscious when he notices cameras pointed in his direction. The natural flow of his creativity seems disrupted by the awareness that everything he creates will be observed and potentially documented. It's different now. Clint observes during one of their morning meetings. "You're not just writing for yourself anymore." Tom nods sadly, then creates a message that reveals his inner conflict. Grateful, but lost, private thoughts. Maybe privacy was part of what made this special. The fact that most people ignored you meant you could write whatever you needed to write. Tom adds new words: miss, silence, understood, only, US. The friendship that has developed between the two men has become one of the most meaningful aspects of Tom's daily routine. Clint's presence provides a witness to his work, someone who understands the significance of each carefully placed leaf without needing explanation or translation. "What if we found a way to have both?" Clint suggests. "Keep the official space, but also find times when you can work without an audience." Tom looks interested, and Clint continues. "Early mornings, before the park gets busy, late afternoons when the tour groups have gone home, times when it's just you and the leaves and whatever you need to say." The idea of reclaiming some private time for his work energizes Tom. He begins arriving at the park before dawn, creating messages in the pre-sunrise quiet that feel more personal, more connected to his original motivation. These early morning compositions often disappear before most visitors arrive, scattered by wind or disturbed by maintenance crews, but their temporary existence serves Tom's need for unobserved expression. During these quiet hours, his messages become more introspective. Lonely, afraid, aging, wondering, purpose. The public Tom creates uplifting messages about hope and community, but the private Tom explores darker emotions that come with loss and isolation. Clint begins arriving earlier to share these quieter moments, understanding that witnessing Tom's more vulnerable expressions is both a privilege and a responsibility. Their friendship deepens through shared silence, through the mutual recognition of two men who have learned that the most important conversations often happen without words. The crisis. The delicate balance between public recognition and private expression is shattered on a cold December morning when Tom arrives at his garden to find his space vandalized. Someone has scattered his carefully stored materials, broken the small branches he uses for letter formation, and spray-painted "Freak Show" across the dedication plaque. Tom stands among the destruction, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Months of careful collection, special leaves preserved between newspaper pages, interesting stones gathered from various corners of the park, twigs shaped by weather into perfect letter forms, all of it destroyed in a few minutes of mindless cruelty. Clint arrives to find Tom sitting on the ground among the debris, holding a torn photograph that had been part of his supplies. The image shows Helen, Tom's late wife, smiling in their garden at home. The photograph has been deliberately ripped in half. Who would do this? Clint's voice carries a cold anger that Tom has never heard before. Tom shakes his head helplessly, then begins gathering pieces of his destroyed materials with the mechanical movements of someone in shock. He's not trying to restore anything. The damage is too extensive. But his hands need something to do, while his mind processes the cruelty. We'll find out who did this. The park has security cameras. Tom looks up and shakes his head again, more emphatically this time. He finds an undamaged stick and writes in the dirt, "No police, makes worse." "Tom, this is vandalism. It's a crime. You can't just let someone destroy your work and walk away." But Tom has already begun walking toward the park exit, carrying the pieces of Helen's photograph. His message is clear. He's done. The public attention, the official recognition, the violation of his sacred space. It's all become too much. Clint follows him to the parking lot, where Tom's ancient pickup truck sits like a refuge from the complications that fame has brought to his simple practice. Don't let them win, Tom. Don't let one angry person destroy what you've built here. Tom stops beside his truck and turns to face Clint. For the first time since they've known each other, his expression shows anger alongside the sadness. He pulls out a piece of paper and writes quickly, "They already won. Made something pure into something public. Now this, too much." But what about the children who come to see your work? What about the veterans who find inspiration in your courage? What about all the people who've learned that communication comes in many forms? Tom's anger softens, but his resolve remains firm. He writes again, "We'll remember, we'll treasure, but can't continue here. Need to find new quiet place." As Tom drives away, Clint stands alone in the parking lot, understanding that something precious has been broken that goes beyond damaged materials or spray-painted signs. The intersection of art and community, of private expression and public witness, has reached a crisis point that may not be resolvable. The search for 3 weeks, Clint searches the town's parks and green spaces, looking for signs of Tom's leaf writing. He checks the community garden area behind the library, the quiet corner of Memorial Park where veterans often gather, even the wooded area near the cemetery where Helen is buried. But Tom seems to have vanished as completely as his leaf messages once did when scattered by autumn winds. The official response to the vandalism has been appropriately outraged, but ultimately ineffective. The security cameras were too distant to capture clear images of the perpetrator, and without Tom's cooperation, the police investigation lacks direction. The Parks Department has installed better lighting and increased patrols, but the damage to the community's sense of safety and inclusion has already been done. Mrs. Patterson brings her class to the empty Veterans Expression Garden, hoping to show them Tom's latest work, only to find the space cleaned but sterile. The maintenance crew has removed all traces of the vandalism, but also all traces of Tom's presence. Without his daily messages, the area looks like any other corner of the park. "Where did the leaf man go?" Sophie asks, the same child who had first shown wonder at Tom's ability to teach leaves to spell. "He had to go somewhere else for a while," Mrs. Patterson explains, but her own voice carries uncertainty about whether Tom will ever return. The absence creates a void that extends beyond the physical space. Teachers who had planned lessons around alternative communication struggled to explain the concept without Tom's living example. Veterans who had found solace in his daily messages feel disconnected from their own stories. Children who had learned to see art in fallen leaves walk past them without recognition. Clint finally finds a clue during a visit to the small diner where Tom occasionally bought coffee. The waitress, a young woman named Sarah, mentions seeing him at the Riverside Cemetery early one morning, sitting beside a grave and arranging leaves in careful patterns. "I didn't want to bother him," she explains. "He looked like he needed to be alone, but I could see from the road that he was making words with leaves, just like he used to do in the park." The next morning, Clint drives to the cemetery as the sun rises over the headstones and monuments. He finds Tom sitting beside Helen's grave, surrounded by a message spelled out in pine needles and winter leaves. "Sorry. Failed. Lost. Way. Love. You." Tom looks up as Clint approaches, his face showing both embarrassment and relief at being found. He's lost weight over the past 3 weeks, and his clothes hang loose on his diminished frame. "Hello, Tom. I've been looking for you." Tom nods but doesn't smile. He points to Helen's headstone, then to the message he's created, then to himself. The meaning is clear. He's been talking to his wife, seeking guidance from the person who had always understood his silence. "What did she tell you?" Tom considers the question, then begins rearranging his pine needles to form new words. Be brave, continue, share, gifts. She wants you to go back. Tom shakes his head and creates a new message. Can't, face, people, broken, trust. Clint settles on the ground beside Tom, ignoring the cold dampness seeping through his pants. I understand why you left. What happened was cruel and unfair, but hiding here isn't the answer. Tom's response is immediate. Not hiding, healing. How long does healing take? The question hangs between them as Tom considers his response. Finally, he creates what may be his most honest message yet. Don't, no, maybe, forever. The reconciliation. They sit together in the cemetery for over an hour, watching as other visitors come and go, leaving flowers and speaking quiet words to the departed. The normalcy of grief and remembrance provides a context that makes Tom's leaf writing seem less unusual, more universally human. "You know," Clint says eventually, "Helen was right about sharing your gifts. But maybe she didn't mean you have to share them with everyone. Maybe some gifts are meant for smaller audiences." Tom looks interested, and Clint continues, "What if you came back, but on your own terms? No official designation, no tour groups, no publicity. Just you and your words and whoever happens to be paying attention." Tom creates a single word: scared. Of what? More words appear: being, hurt, again, losing, voice, again. "Tom, they already took your voice once in the war. They can't take it again unless you let them. Your voice isn't in your throat anymore. It's in your hands, in your eyes, in your ability to see beauty and meaning in fallen leaves. No one can destroy that unless you stop believing in it." Tom stares at his hands for a long moment, then begins creating the longest message Clint has ever seen him attempt. Using every available leaf and needle, he crafts a narrative that covers several square feet around Helen's grave. Came, home, broken, lost, voice, war, Helen, loved, silence, understood, words, not, needed, always, after, she, died, silence, became, prison, leaves, became, key, opened, door, to, world, again, people, saw, understood, felt, less, alone, then, someone, angry, tried, to, lock, door, again, but, door, still, open, choice, to, walk, through, or, stay, safe, inside. Clint reads the entire message twice, absorbing the profound simplicity of Tom's spiritual journey from isolation to connection and back toward choice. "The door is still open," he repeats. "That's the key, isn't it? You get to choose." Tom nods, then adds a final word to his message: choose. "What do you choose?" Tom stands slowly, his joints protesting the long period of sitting on cold ground. He looks around the cemetery, taking in the peaceful atmosphere of remembered lives and ongoing love. Then he begins gathering his materials with the purposeful movements Clint remembers from their first meeting. "Going. Home," Tom spells out with his remaining leaves. "To the park?" Tom shakes his head and points toward the cemetery exit, then to Clint, then makes a gesture that encompasses both of them. He's not just going back to the park. He's going back to the community he's built there, starting with the friendship that has sustained him through crisis. Tom's return to Riverside Park happens quietly, without announcement or fanfare. He arrives at his usual time on a Tuesday morning in January, when the regular dog walkers and early joggers provide a familiar rhythm to the winter landscape. The official plaque still bears faint traces of the spray paint that couldn't be completely removed, but Tom ignores it as he begins his work. His first message back is simple: grateful, friends, home. Mrs. Patterson, arriving with her weekly walk before school, is the first to notice his return. She approaches cautiously, unsure if he wants to be left alone or welcomed back. "Tom, it's good to see you again. We've missed you." He looks up from his work and smiles, the first genuine smile Clint has seen from him since the vandalism. Tom adds new words to his message: missed. You, too. "The children have been asking about you every day. They wanted to know when the Leaf Man would come back to teach them new words." Tom's response is immediate: ready, to, teach, again. Word of Tom's return spreads organically through the community, carried by the same informal networks that had originally brought attention to his work. But this time, there's an unspoken understanding that his presence is fragile, precious, and deserving of protection. Sophie arrives with her mother the following day, carrying a small bag of leaves she's collected from her own yard. "I saved these for you," she announces, presenting her offering with the seriousness of a diplomatic gift. Tom accepts the leaves with equal gravity, examining each one carefully, before incorporating them into his daily message. Sophie watches, fascinated, as her contributions become part of words that spell out friendship, kindness, hope. "Did my leaves say good words?" she asks. Tom nods and creates a special message just for her. Your leaves speak love. The interaction sets a new tone for Tom's work. Instead of being observed as a curiosity or treated as public art, his leaf writing becomes participatory. Visitors begin bringing their own contributions. Interesting stones, colorful leaves, small twigs shaped by nature into useful forms. Tom incorporates these gifts into his daily messages, creating a collaborative form of expression that belongs to the entire community. The new understanding. The change in dynamics doesn't escape the attention of park officials, but their response is markedly different from the previous bureaucratic approach. The park's director, Janet Morrison, visits Tom's Corner personally, not to issue regulations, but to understand what's taking place. "I want to apologize for what happened before," she tells Clint, who has resumed his role as Tom's unofficial interpreter. "We handled the situation poorly. We turned something organic and beautiful into something institutional and vulnerable." "Tom doesn't hold grudges," Clint replies. "He's focused on moving forward, not looking back. I'd like to find a way to support what he's doing without turning it into a circus again. Maybe some basic protections without formal designation." Tom, overhearing the conversation, begins creating a response. "Grateful. Protection. Not publicity. Understood. What if we just made sure this area gets cleaned around your work instead of cleaning it up? Small signs asking visitors to be respectful. Nothing that draws attention, just common courtesy." Tom considers this offer, then adds to his message, "Yes, simple, respect." The agreement that emerges is elegant in its simplicity. No official designation, no formal recognition, just basic protection for Tom's workspace and implicit support for his daily practice. The maintenance crew learns to work around his arrangements, and small, unobtrusive signs remind visitors that the space is being used for artistic expression. More importantly, the community that has grown around Tom's work develops its own protective instincts. Regular visitors understand the unwritten rules. Photographs are welcome, but flash is discouraged. Contributions are appreciated, but Tom's artistic vision is primary. Children's questions are encouraged, but Tom shouldn't be overwhelmed by constant demands for interaction. The deepening practice. As winter progresses into spring, Tom's work evolves to incorporate the changing seasons. Snow provides a temporary canvas for messages spelled out in dark twigs and stones. Early spring bulbs create punctuation marks in sentences formed from last year's remaining leaves. The cyclical nature of his materials reinforces the themes of renewal and continuity that run through his daily messages. Rebirth, second, chances, growth appear frequently in his spring compositions, but so do words like memory, Johnny, Helen, gratitude, reminding observers that healing doesn't mean forgetting. Clint notices that Tom's messages have become more personal again, less focused on universal themes and more willing to explore individual emotions. The return of privacy, the knowledge that his work won't automatically become public spectacle, has restored his willingness to be vulnerable in his expression. One morning in late April, Tom creates his most ambitious piece since returning. A sprawling narrative that incorporates early wildflowers, fresh green leaves and stones to tell the story of a man learning to live with loss while remaining open to connection. The piece takes him 3 hours to complete, and when finished, it covers nearly 20 square feet of ground. "This is remarkable, Tom. You're not just writing words anymore. You're creating landscapes of meaning." Tom's response reveals his growing confidence. Learning, expanding, voice, stronger. "Your voice was always strong. You're just learning to trust it again." Tom adds a final element to his composition. Trust, earned, daily. The student becomes teacher. The relationship between Tom and the community reaches a new level when Mrs. Patterson asks if he would be willing to work directly with her students on a special project about alternative communication. Instead of just observing his work, the children would learn to create their own leaf messages under his guidance. Tom's enthusiasm for the project is evident in his immediate response. Honored, excited, yes. The first session takes place on a warm May morning, with 12 third graders sitting in a circle around Tom's usual workspace. Each child has brought a notebook and pencil, expecting a traditional lesson, but Tom has other ideas. He begins by showing them how to really see a leaf, not just its color and shape, but its texture, its weight, the way light passes through its surface. He demonstrates how different leaves create different effects when arranged together, how shadows and spaces between elements can be as important as the elements themselves. "Mr. Tom, how do you know which leaves to use for which letters?" asks Marcus, a boy who usually struggles with traditional writing. Tom selects several leaves of different sizes and shapes, then arranges them to spell Marcus's name. But instead of using uniform letters, he shows how the natural variations in the leaves can express personality. Pointed leaves for sharp consonants, rounded leaves for soft vowels, torn edges for letters that trail off like the end of a spoken word. "It's like the leaves are alive," exclaims Sarah, one of Sophie's classmates. "They're not just making letters, they're showing feelings." Tom nods enthusiastically and creates a new demonstration. The word happy, spelled out in bright yellow leaves that seem to dance with energy, followed by sad in brown, drooping leaves that convey melancholy through their very posture. The children spend the next hour creating their own leaf messages, with Tom moving among them, offering gentle guidance and encouragement. Some spell out simple words like mom or dog, while others attempt more complex expressions like "I miss my grandpa" or "spring makes me smile." But the real breakthrough comes when Marcus, the boy who struggles with writing, creates a message that uses no letters at all. Instead, he arranges leaves in patterns that somehow convey the concept of movement, of running, of freedom. When asked to explain his creation, he points to it and says, "It's how I feel when I'm on my bike." Tom studies Marcus's work with the same attention he gives his own, then creates a response. Art speaks all languages. The ripple effect. The success of the children's workshop inspires other community groups to explore their own connections to Tom's practice. The Senior Center organizes a reminiscence project where elderly residents create leaf arrangements that represent memories from their youth. Veterans from the local VFW post begin gathering monthly in the park to share their own stories through temporary art. A local art therapist, Dr. Rebecca Chen, approaches Tom about incorporating his techniques into her practice with trauma survivors. Through Clint's interpretation, she explains how the temporary nature of leaf art can help clients express difficult emotions without the pressure of creating something permanent. There's something liberating about art that's meant to disappear, she tells Tom. It allows people to say things they might be afraid to preserve, but the act of saying them still has value. Tom's response indicates his immediate understanding of the concept. Safe. To. Speak. Truth. When. Truth. Can. Fade. The therapeutic applications of Tom's approach extend beyond trauma work. A support group for people with communication disorders begins meeting in the park, exploring how natural materials can supplement or replace traditional speech. Parents of children with autism find that the tactile, visual nature of leaf arrangement provides their kids with new ways to express complex ideas. Each group that discovers Tom's method adapts it to their own needs, creating variations that maintain the essential spirit while serving different purposes. The park begins to feel less like a single artist's workspace and more like a laboratory for human expression. And the recognition. As Tom's influence spreads beyond the local community, outside recognition becomes inevitable. A regional arts council nominates him for an award honoring innovative community art. A university researcher requests permission to study his methods for a paper on alternative communication. A documentary filmmaker expresses interest in creating a short film about his work. But Tom's response to these opportunities reveals how much he's learned from his previous experience with unwanted attention. Instead of automatically saying yes or reflexively withdrawing, he considers each request carefully, evaluating whether it serves his core mission of communication and connection. To the Arts Council, he responds, "Honored, but prefer quiet recognition." To the researcher, he agrees to participate, but only if the focus remains on the techniques rather than his personal story. Methods, yes. Biography, no. To the filmmaker, he offers a compromise. Document the community's use of his techniques rather than making him the central figure. Show others' voices, not mine. These responses reflect a mature understanding of how to maintain authentic artistic practice while engaging with a world that often prefers spectacle to substance. Tom has learned to protect the essential core of his work while remaining open to meaningful connections. Clint watches this evolution with deep respect for Tom's growing wisdom. You've learned how to stay true to yourself while still sharing your gifts. That's a rare skill. Tom's response indicates his awareness of the delicate balance. Helen, would, be, proud, found, way, to, speak, without, losing, soul. The full circle. On a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Clint first discovered Tom arranging leaves beneath the ancient elm, the two men find themselves in the same positions. Tom creating his daily message, Clint observing from the weathered bench. But everything else has changed. The park bustles with gentle activity as various community groups pursue their own expressive projects inspired by Tom's example. Children from Mrs. Patterson's class work on a collaborative piece near the playground. Senior citizens share stories while arranging fallen leaves into memory patterns. A small group of veterans creates a temporary memorial using natural materials. Tom's own work has evolved far beyond simple word spelling. His current piece integrates multiple layers of meaning. Words spelled in leaves, patterns created with stones, shadows cast by carefully positioned twigs. The overall effect creates a complex narrative about seasonal change, human adaptation, and the persistence of beauty in the face of loss. Look what you've started, Tom. This whole community has learned to speak in new languages because you had the courage to share your voice. Tom pauses in his work to survey the scene around them. His expression shows wonder at the organic growth of creative expression that has emerged from his simple daily practice. He adds words to his current composition, not just my voice, everyone's voice. That's the real gift, isn't it? Not just finding your own way to communicate, but helping others find theirs. Tom nods, then creates what may be his most profound message yet. Silence taught me to listen, listening taught me to hear. Others need voice too. As the morning progresses and the various groups complete their projects, a natural gathering forms around Tom's workspace. Without any formal organization, people begin sharing what they've created, explaining their choices of materials and the meanings embedded in their arrangements. Sophie, now a year older and more articulate, presents a leaf sculpture that represents her family. This big red leaf is my dad because he's strong and loud. This little yellow one is me because I'm small but bright. And this green one is my mom because she takes care of everything. Tom studies her work with the same seriousness he brings to his own, then creates a response that incorporates elements from her piece. Family, love, takes, many, forms, all, beautiful. An elderly veteran approaches with a simple arrangement that spells out the names of fallen comrades. His hands shake slightly as he places the final leaf, and his voice carries the weight of decades when he speaks. Tom, you showed me that I don't have to carry these names alone. I can share them, honor them, let them be part of something larger. Tom's response bridges generations of military service. Remember, together, honor, together, heal, together. The legacy. As the informal gathering begins to disperse and people head home for lunch, Clint and Tom remain at the bench, surrounded by the temporary artworks that will be scattered by evening wind and tomorrow's maintenance crew. The ephemeral nature of the expression no longer feels like limitation, but like freedom. The freedom to create without the burden of permanence, to speak truth without the pressure of perfection. Do you ever miss the old days, when it was just you and the leaves and no one paying attention? Tom considers the question carefully, watching as the last families pack up their materials and head toward the parking lot. His response reveals the depth of his transformation. Miss, quiet, sometimes, but not loneliness, connection, worth, less, solitude. You found a way to have both, private moments for personal expression and shared times for community building. Balance, Tom writes, learned, hard, way, but learned. As they prepare to leave, Tom creates one final message for the day, using the finest leaves he's collected and positioning them where the afternoon light will illuminate them perfectly. Grateful for friend who saw words when others saw only leaves. Clint reads the message and feels the weight of their shared journey. From that first moment of curiosity about a strange man arranging debris to this recognition of profound friendship built on mutual respect and understanding. I'm grateful too, Tom. You taught me that communication isn't about having the right words. It's about having the courage to reach out, even when you're not sure how your message will be received. Tom's final response of the day encapsulates everything they've learned together. Courage. 2. Speak. Wisdom. 2. Listen. Love. 2. Understand. The closing. As winter approaches again and the cycle of seasons prepares to renew itself, Tom's practice continues to evolve and inspire. The community that has grown around his work has become largely self-sustaining, with new participants constantly discovering the power of natural expression, while longtime members serve as mentors and guides. The park itself has been transformed not by official designation or bureaucratic intervention, but by the organic growth of creative community. Signs of expressive activity appear throughout the grounds. Stone arrangements near the pond, twig sculptures along the walking paths, flower patterns in the community garden that spell out messages of hope and healing. Tom remains at the center of this creative ecosystem, not as a leader or teacher in any formal sense, but as the quiet catalyst whose courage to share his own voice gave permission for others to find theirs. His daily practice continues, each message a small act of faith that communication is possible across all barriers of circumstance and ability. On quiet mornings when he works alone, Tom sometimes creates messages addressed directly to Helen, sharing the day's small victories and ongoing challenges with the woman who first taught him that love transcends the need for spoken words. On busy afternoons when the park fills with collaborative creative activity, he serves as anchor and inspiration for a community learning to speak in languages older than speech itself. The mockery that once greeted his work has been replaced by recognition and respect, but more importantly, it has been replaced by understanding. People no longer see a strange man playing with debris, but an artist, teacher, healer, whose commitment to authentic expression has created space for others to discover their own authentic voices. Sometimes silence says more than words. Sometimes the most profound communication happens without sound. Sometimes the courage to speak in your own language gives others permission to discover theirs. Tom's legacy isn't measured in the permanence of his leaf arrangements. They scatter with each wind, dissolve with each rain, decompose with each season. His legacy lives in the community of voices he has helped birth, in the children who see art in fallen leaves, in the adults who have learned that expression takes countless forms, and in the simple truth that every person has something worth saying if the world will take time to listen. The language of leaves may be temporary, but the connections they create between human hearts are as enduring as love itself. In teaching others to write with the materials that Earth provides, Tom has reminded an entire community that communication is not about having the perfect words. It's about having the courage, to reach across the silence and touch another soul. And in the end, that courage, quiet, persistent, generous, may be the most important message of all. This story reminds us that true communication transcends the boundaries of speech and hearing, of ability and disability, of conventional and unconventional expression. In a world that often moves too quickly to notice the quiet voices around us, Tom's patient practice of leaf writing serves as a powerful reminder that every person has something valuable to say. We just need to learn how to listen in all the languages that human creativity can devise. The measure of a community isn't found in its capacity to make everyone the same, but in its willingness to celebrate the unique ways each member contributes to the larger conversation. When we create space for alternative voices, we don't just help individuals find expression, we enrich the entire symphony of human
Sometimes the most
profound teachers are those who never intended to teach, who simply live their truth with such authenticity that others are inspired to discover their own. Tom's transformation from isolated veteran to community catalyst demonstrates that healing is rarely a solitary journey. It happens in relationship, in connection, in the courage to be seen and to see others in return.